You've heard of farm-to-table restaurants, but what about farm-to-table furniture? Whitney Manney talks to an artist using this sustainable approach to make tables, chairs, and more.
So this is our showroom gallery, and this is where we show all the pieces that are made in our workshop, and we feature furniture and sculptural art.
This is beautiful. So when I'm looking around the showroom, is everything designed in-house? You got help? How does that work?
Everything is designed and made here in our studio. It's very much part of our value system.
So can you tell me a little bit more behind the philosophy of Madison Flitch? Because I heard like farm to table, right?
Right.
And when you hear that, you think like restaurants. I hear that all the time with restaurants.
Right.
It's truly a sustainable term, but how did you apply that to this functional art?
Well, obviously I love the farm to table concept and the values behind it. And I thought, well, how can we apply it to anything that we do in the fine crafts? And there was a concept out there called tree to table. And that's the idea of harvesting your own urban wood. Urban wood comes from a city, someone's backyard, a city park, any wood that isn't coming from an active managed forest. The simplest way we acquire our wood is through working directly with tree service providers. So oftentimes really big, beautiful trees that have been brought into the community to beautify it come down for whatever reason, and they're great for furniture making or sculptural arts.
And is there any kind of like quality control that you do, like as an artist, as a designer and a maker, like you're looking at the wood, is there anything you look for?
Right.
Like, does everything work for you that comes from these plants,
Right. No, like when you're working with urban wood, that's one of the big problems is that there could be somebody built a fence around a tree and the tree grew around that fence and now you have metal in the tree. Or trees are sometimes 200 years old and you might have really old bullets or big nails in the tree. That's fun from a historical point of view, but it's really bad for furniture making. In one case, one of our pieces of work, we had about a 500-year-old tree, a white oak, that was harvested from the Thomas Hart Benton property, who was a famous Kansas City artist. About 200 years ago, there was a big forest fire, and that tree survived and continued to grow. But in the middle of the tree, you could actually see ash stains in the wood. So in that case, we sculpted pieces that would highlight the story of that tree by implementing fire and other techniques to draw out the beauty and the history. Whitney, I'd like you to meet Megan Pace.
Hi.
So Megan is our creative director. She started here as an artist in residence.
So very nice to meet you. What does it look like when the wood comes in? Is there a prep process once it gets here?
Really at the beginning of the process, after the wood has been milled, we transport it ourselves to our family farm and it goes into a 50-year-old turkey brooder barn.
Okay.
Has about 10,000 square feet of space. And it was great to season the wood in.
Yeah.
The wood has to dry for about 2 to 3 years.
Wow.
Depending on the thickness. It's a long time. Yeah, we're playing the long game.
Yeah.
And then when the wood is ready, we have to actually transport it back here to the shop and let it continue to cure to the environmental conditions of our shop before we can really work properly with it.
So with this farm to table approach, how does this come into play with your decision making when you're in the studio? Are there like moments in the studio where you're just like, this has to happen or we cannot do this because like the resources are kind of limited in a sense?
In the woodshop side, like we'll get scraps like these coming off of our larger projects, and sometimes I like to look at them and figure out how to use them to make smaller sculptures. The last piece that I did, I was really trying to use a lot of the cherry scraps that we had around and just kind of make sure that I used all that up. But then like the scraps from that even is basically sawdust at that point.
I mean, nothing wrong with that. You using it, it has its purpose.
We are very much a materials-focused design company. We let it govern most of our decisions because we have to allow the wood to tell us what we can do and cannot do. And that helps us actually create a creative box for us to stay within, and our design really starts there in that box.
We're also here to talk about Madison Stitch, right?
It's a crazy story, and imagining a furniture maker turned fashion designer. But that's essentially what happened. Was during the pandemic, we opened our gallery about 3 or 4 months before the pandemic hit.
Okay.
And we didn't feel established enough to just see things through. And so we decided to pivot to making face masks. And we released those masks pretty early in the crisis. And because we were early, they really took off. And so I thought it would be something that would just keep us afloat, keep the lights on. Instead, we had such demand that I had to hire over 60 people. We drew mostly from the refugee and immigrant and designer community. So we joked that Madison Flitch was getting rebranded as Madison Stitch. And I thought, well, why don't we just make it a real thing instead of a joke? So we started Madison Stitch about 3 months after we launched our first face mask. And we started making fashion handbags.
So with Madison Stitch, do you have that farm to table kind of approach still as far as sourcing your materials?
Yes, so one of the big discoveries we made is a major leather tannery called Herman Oak is actually based out of St. Louis, Missouri. And there's maybe 12 tanneries left in North America.
Yeah.
So the fact that it was right there in Missouri meant that we could use that leather and still adhere to our value system of using local materials.
Tell me about like those first steps of creating the mask, because you are not necessarily a sewist, right? What did that process look like? Did you have to get help to like kind of create the pattern? Did you have community resources?
So at first my assistant and I, who also did not know how to sew, sat down with the sewing machine and just tried to figure it out like good entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
We quickly realized we couldn't do it exactly the way it needed to be done. So that's when we started to reach out to all the stitchers and designers for help. That led us to a nursing innovation group that offered a face mask design that was open source and doctor approved.
At what point were you just like, oh, we need an actual team?
Right. We spent a week researching, trying to gather the materials that we could find, and then we released it online on a Wednesday. By that Friday, we had thousands of orders.
Wow.
So we knew very quickly that we needed lots of help.
Yeah.
And that's what led us to reaching out to anyone in the community. Rightfully Sewn is one of the organizations we reached out to. They put us in contact with an Afghanistan refugee family, about 5 sewists who worked out of their home. And they approached us and said, we can do 200 face masks a day.
You can't say no to that,
You
right?
can't say no. And they came through.
Yeah.
So we gave them all the materials. They would take it back to their home, make all the face masks, and then just bring them back. So groups like Rightfully Sewn, whose mission is to train a lot of marginalized people in the business of fashion and sewing and stitching, they were immensely helpful to us to get the face mask project going. We still work very closely with those organizations to try to recruit, train, develop really the next set of refugees who come into the city. We also work closely with business groups like Welcoming KC, which is responsible for trying to create a business environment in the city that's welcoming to refugees and immigrants. A lot of our role is serving as an advocate within the business community, sharing our experience, sharing how our platform was built, and just really how frankly easy it was to incorporate and integrate their work into our workflows so that other businesses can do it.
So I noticed too when we walked into the studio, photos of your stitchers. Is it important for your audience and the public, the city, to know like this is who's helping make this happen? This is the heart of the business. Is that important for you?
Well, it was super important to me as working with them, because what was meaningful to me was their stories and their character and who they were. How did you develop your skills? How did you, because it's not just, we talk about skill as if it's in a vacuum. But there's personality behind skill.
Yeah.
And how did that just happen? So I wanted to tell their stories, and their pictures holding the bags that they designed for the company kind of became our sacred objects around the studio, because it reminded us and our clients that there's a person behind the product.
So can you then kind of just guide me through this choice of going from mass to leather? That is a jump.
It's not an easy jump, right?
Yeah.
We wanted to stay in fabric because that's what we were used to at the time. So we tried to make fabric style bags as another product to sell utilizing the stitcher workforce that we had developed. And everybody wanted to continue working. I was, as a business person, very worried about the future, and face masks aren't always going to be in demand. So what do we do next? And there weren't that many bag makers in Kansas City. And so I thought, well, let's fill that space as an artisan-made bag option. After a little bit of time, realizing that we had a local leather resource that fit within our value system of trying to leverage the natural resources available to us, that's what really led us to leather.
A huge conversation with wearables and fashion in general is fast fashion. People are, wearing something for a couple of weeks. You see it at the Goodwill, or you see it in the trash. I mean, I would hope nobody would ever do that with these. Is that something you all kind of think about, to where you're wanting to design something that people really understand the value, right, and the craftsmanship?
Try to shoot for heirloom quality.
Yeah.
Like, will you hand this down? Will you keep it forever? How much use are you going to get out of this? Hopefully you'll have it for a lifetime.
Right.
We fit very comfortably in the slow fashion movement, where the focus is on producing things with quality because we want things to last.
So when the leather comes from the tannery, I mean, I know you can make choices, you can tell them what you need to a certain extent. Are there still surprises when you get the hides?
There are surprises, and a lot of times, well, of course, the skin tells the story of the animal, and there are scars and scratches and burns and brands, and each hide tells a story about the living organism that it came from.
So working with a local, based in Missouri, tannery, do you feel like you're able to just have better quality, you're able to have better quality control of what you're working with?
For us, it serves as an education. We have the resource right there to be able to pick up the phone and ask questions, or visit the tannery and learn the entire process that they do from beginning to end.
Right.
So much of leather that you buy from just say a store, people can't tell you where it came from.
Right.
They can't tell you how it was made. For us, being able to go to someone that we can trust is just like a chef who goes to the farmer, and they just know that farmer knows his business. And so they can trust their supplier much better.
Can you talk to me a little bit more about the sustainability efforts of Madison Flitch that help fuel Madison Stitch? Is there crossover?
We have recently started saving our sawdust from carving with certain woods. They have the ability to create dyes for the leather.
So a natural dye kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you have vast differences of color, depending on what type of sawdust it is? Does it create different shades?
Yeah, the one that we've got right now that creates the most significant depth of shade is the mahogany.
Well, John, thank you so much. I've learned a lot about leather. Might not, do too much woodworking in the future, but I mean, what a beautiful space. The gallery is beautiful. Love the wood shop. This space is amazing as well. Thank you for showing me around and just telling me more about your initiative.